Thickest stability shoe of all time? I think so. It's the Hoka Gaviota 4. Let's run with it. Before we get started, I do want to say these shoes were provided to me by Roadrunner Sports. However, they didn't have a chance to preview this video, and this final synopsis is my own. And I'd also like to say, please leave a like on the video and consider subscribing. Here we go. The Gaviota 4 is Hoka's premium Ultra Max Cushion Stability Daily Trainer. Now, if you're familiar with the Hoka lineup, this is basically the stability version of the Bondi, and is basically the larger, more cushioned stability shoe compared to the Hoka Arahi, which is like the more classic stability shoe, and is the stability version of essentially the Clifton, or kind of pairs well with that. So we're looking at one of the thickest stability shoes around, and we do get some minor updates to the upper and midsole. This $170 shoe comes in at 11.3 ounces, which is, yes, on the heavier end of things, but for that weight, you do get, I believe it's 40 millimeters in the heel and 35 in the forefoot, same as last year for the classic 5mm Hoka drop. So you get a ton of cushioning here. Now, if we compare this to the Arahi, which is again is like the more trimmed down stability shoe, at least compared to the Gaviota, it's gonna weigh about 2 ounces less, I believe coming in at like roughly 9.3 ounces, and it has about 5mm less of cushioning. So the Arahi is gonna have like 35 and 30, and then the Gaviota is gonna be 40 and 35. So you're gonna get 5 more millimeters of cushioning for the Gaviota in both the heel and the forefoot compared to the smaller Arahi. The midsole is roughly the same. It's still the same spring measurement, so the distance the toe is off the ground, the distance the heel is off the ground, essentially the curvature of the shoe, and the total volume in the midsole is the same. The change, however, comes with the J-frame and the type of foam. It's going to be a little bit softer this year. So if you're not familiar, the J-frame is the technology or the setup that allows the Gaviota and the Arahi to provide that stable ride for overpronators and keeps your foot from rolling to the inside. And the way that these shoes do that is, again, through the J-frame, but it's essentially a dual density foam setup where if you flip the shoe over, you can actually see the letter J, where it has this gray foam that creates the letter J, goes all the way up to the top of the medial side. And this is going to be a harder foam, a little bit more dense compared to the compression molded EVA foam, which is the white foam you can see on the outside. And this allows your foot, or keeps your foot from rolling to the inside and giving you a little bit more guidance and stability. And plus it wraps a little bit up on the lateral side, so it does kind of provide like a clip of a more stable foam, a harder foam that keeps your ankle kind of locked in and going the correct direction and keeps you from rolling to the inside. The midsole also features a rocker geometry to it. However, this setup here is going to be a late stage meta rocker compared to things like the Rincon and the Clifton, which have an early stage meta rocker. Now, what does a late stage meta rocker mean? Well, essentially the transition zone, we start to kind of have that toe off experience, or the curvature of the shoe is going to be in front of the metatarsal heads and your foot. Essentially, the curvature is going to be more towards the front of the shoe or start a little bit later. So it's going to be a little bit more stable in the forefoot, so you have more flat area to land and then take off from, because this is a stability shoe. Now, this is better for more stable, maybe a little bit slower paces compared to, again, the Rincon and the Clifton, which have early stage meta rocker, which really start to kind of roll you upon your toes a little bit sooner. So the transition zone before the metatarsal heads and your foot give you a little bit more of a stable experience in the forefoot, and then kind of start to roll you up on your toes. So all that means, all that boils down to, is you're going to notice the rocker geometry a little bit less compared to if you tried some of those other more traditional or more popular Hoka models. And building upon the stability story of this shoe, you have a really wide forefoot section, flat-waisted geometry through the midfoot, again making it very wide and having a very large platform to land on, thus creating a very inherently stable base. So in my opinion, even though Hoka did soften up the J-frame, which is that harder foam on the medial side that wraps up partially on the lateral side, it's going to be a more firm Ultra Max cushion experience, especially if you're coming from the Bondi. Now, the whole reason for this is if you have a really thick shoe, you don't want it to be super squishy where your foot can kind of go side to side, and I think that's the case here. So it has a nice level of impact protection. You don't feel the ground at all. It feels very nice underfoot. It's just not going to be the softest or bounciest experience for a shoe with this much midsole. The one minor exception I will say is in the heel. You do get a little bit of bounce out of it just because there is so much foam there, and if you heel strike, you will notice it. But for the most part, it isn't the bounciest or softest shoe, which helps with the stability category and feeling. The upper is kind of your typical engineer mesh, decent breathability, rather thin and very comfortable. I thought the fit was excellent, ran true to size, and helped me feel very connected to the shoe, which is very important because you are rather high off the ground. The tongue is now thicker and more plush compared to last year. It's very similar to what we see on the Clifton. Now, the one peculiar thing is that it's only gusseted on one side. So the tongue is attached only on the medial side and not on the lateral side. Now, all this means is, I think if your tongue typically kind of tends to shift to the lateral side, it won't because it is attached on that side. But For whatever reason, if your tongue tends to shift to the inside, it is not attached and it will do that. So for me personally, I didn't have any issues. It didn't make a difference. I would just keep that in mind. It's only attached or only gusseted on the medial side. Moving to the back of the shoe, we do get a little bit more padding in the ankle and Achilles area. Personally, very comfortable, locked me in well, didn't have an issue. The heel counter itself is very similar to the Clifton, maybe a little bit more rigid, but overall, very good experience. The entire lockdown and fit I thought was superior, kept me well connected to the shoe, which again is important because of how high I felt off the ground. As far as the pull tab, very similar to what we see on the Rincon, just a piece of string, worked well, but overall, just a little bit more padding in the tongue, ankle, and Achilles area. Very plush, very luxurious experience. I think kind of ties into the overall theme of this shoe, just being all out comfort. Moving to the outsole, same exact setup as last year. You get strategic rubber in the forefoot heel section, a little bit of exposed J-frame rubber on the medial side, but for the most part, it's kind of like your typical Hoka experience. Traction works well. You just have a ton of surface area. Now, durability, I think, is one of those things with Hoka shoes. Sometimes it might not be the best, but just keep that in mind. You just do have a lot of surface area here. So those are all the basic facts about this shoe. Let's talk about what works well and what could potentially be improved. The first big positive for me was the fit, lockdown, and comfort of the upper. They add additional padding in the back of the shoe and in the tongue was well appreciated and just provided a very comfortable, true to size experience. The next positive for me was that the shoe delivered on what it was supposed to do. And I realize that sounds silly, but sometimes the mission statement of the shoe doesn't always align up with how it performs in real world scenarios. However, that's not the case here. The Gaviota really does deliver on being an Ultra Max Cushion Stability Daily Trainer. Felt very stable, provided a nice ride. You do have a nice level of comfort with the upper. And if you're someone who's on your feet all day or just wants some stability in a shoe of, I guess, this kind of proportions, this lines up very well. And the last positive for me was that the J-frame stability mechanism wasn't too intrusive or clunky. I really enjoyed how it provided stability without being overbearing, if that makes sense. You have a nice kind of wrap around the heel that kind of guides you into place and it keeps your foot from rolling in, and just didn't feel, again, intrusive is probably the best word. So it felt very natural, it didn't feel out of place, and I enjoyed running in this particular stability configuration. However, the shoe wasn't perfect, and there are a couple things that can probably be improved. The first negative is it comes in like 11.3, 11.4 ounce range, which is basically 2 full ounces heavier than the Arahi, the smaller stability version of this shoe. So I would just keep that in mind. It's just not the lightest, most nimble shoe ever, but it depends on what you're looking for. That might not be a deal breaker, it just is on the heavier side of things. The next thing I wish they could kind of improve or tweak is maybe make the midsole a bit livelier. Yes, I know you don't want a soft midsole in a stability shoe that's this big, but if they put like a certain layer of foam, maybe a supercritical, something that's a little bit bouncier, squishier, to give you a little bit more, I guess, liveliness in the midsole, just a little bit more pop, a little bit more excitement, I think that would go a long way. I think you could definitely kind of pair a little bit more bounce with the stability to give you a more exciting experience in a shoe like this. I think it has a lot of potential. It definitely accomplishes the goal. I just think there's a little bit more room for potential because it is a more shoe focused on impact protection rather than energy return or liveliness. So if that's what you're looking for, I think that's great. It just isn't like the most exciting, fun shoe to run in just because it's more dull EVA. It doesn't have a lot of bounce to it, which helps with the stability aspect. It just doesn't give you the most pleasant or most exciting running experience, especially with a lot of the other versions we're coming out that do have stability mechanisms. And the last negative for me, and this is more of a minor gripe, is I wish they would update the styling to make it a little bit more modern, a little bit sportier looking. Now, Hoka comes out with some amazing looking shoes. I love like the Supersonic, the Mach, the Carbon X3, the Rincon. I think those all look super awesome, but you'd be surprised how people pick their shoes based on look. So I wish they'd update this a little bit more. I think more people might like the Gaviota depending on how the styling was updated. So where does that leave us? Well, like I said before, I think Gaviota does deliver on being a max cushion stability running shoe that has a lot of premium materials that are very comfortable. You can probably wear it all day. So if you're on your feet all day, or if you just want to have a nice easy day shoe that gives you stability and guidance, I think it works well. Now, the things you have to get over are the fact that it comes in like the 11.4 ounce range. It's not the liveliest or most enjoyable midsole ever, and the styling might not look ideal. And you could probably get away with just using the Arahi, which is like 2 full ounces lighter and has very similar traits. So it just kind of depends on what you want. Yes, this does have more cushion than the Arahi, but the Arahi is much lighter, and I don't know if you really get a whole lot more with this shoe. It just depends on how much cushion you really want or feel, or what you're using this shoe for. So I would just keep that in mind. If you're looking at the Gaviota, take a look at the Arahi, try them out, try both of them. You might like one better than the other, and you might end up going with the Gaviota, just depending on what you're looking for. But just keep that in mind because they are somewhat similar in their stability mechanisms. Well, that concludes the review. Let me know in the comments what you think of this Ultra Max Cushion stability shoe. I'm Ryan from Ryan's Running Reviews. Hope you guys have a good day, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks.